Today we have Jenny Markins presenting on executive coaching. Jenny is a certified master executive coach and a licensed independent clinical social worker, also an adjunct faculty at Springfield College. Jenny's also a principal at the Markins Group. Welcome, Jenny.
Thanks, Emily. Good day. I'm Jenny Markins, and we're going to talk about coaching today. Executive coaching is a service that's helped countless employers and employees maximize teamwork, heighten individual and group performance, and enhance employee retention as well as job satisfaction. Executive coaching is now widely used by corporations all over the world and has a proven, effective, and efficient means of cultivating excellence and growth, both for businesses and for individuals working in business. For this webinar, we will explore some information about how coaching may be useful to individuals in leadership positions, to individuals who are seeking to refine their abilities, and to human resource professionals who may value additional information about coaching as a resource. Coaching is a natural phenomenon that takes place every day around nearly all aspects of business, and one could also say life. Most often about tasks and how work can best be organized and accomplished. Much of this type of coaching is vital, and people can have valuable coaching skills even in non-managerial roles. However, they can sometimes be remarkably unskilled and even quite political in the manner in which they share information with others or seek feedback. In business today, many persons in management positions have never had formal training or never had one-to-one supervision in management behaviors and practices. Some programs of study in formal management schools may offer business psychology, but offer little in the way of training on the job in actual management situations during a course of study where habits of self-reflection and conscious awareness can be cultivated. Today's businesses have become increasingly lean, and the time for mentoring and coaching by senior executives can be severely limited. Moreover, many managers have stellar skills in a needed area, but demonstrate not knowing what they don't know in other significant areas. Often these deficits are tolerated due to the overwhelming press of work, but have long-term consequences that are often difficult to rectify. By way of example, or examples, people with strong technical backgrounds can sometimes find themselves promoted to positions where they're unable to adequately address the interpersonal aspects of management. For example, roles, boundaries, chain of command concerns. And this vastly complicates the completion of tasks as well as business relationships. Other managers promoted within a company may struggle to differentiate from peer groups with whom they have worked for many years or have difficulty with delegation. The problem of silos and managers who enact peer relationships with their subordinates has also been a source of discussion in countless books and journal articles. Gender dynamics in business are also a source of much discussion, and no one enjoys a micromanager. There can be especially challenging dynamics in managing some groups of people. Management can also be enormously isolating and stressful. Coaching can be a profoundly helpful means of addressing day-to-day patterns and problems in management. There are also individuals who show great promise, and in some companies, there is a practice of investing early in outstanding talent or attracting promising employees by providing opportunities for accelerated learning. Overall, companies are becoming more proactive in seeking coaching for persons who undertake management positions. There are predictable concerns that will arise for managers in nearly every circumstance that can often benefit from a private, objective relationship in which to assess their performance and enhance skill. Very often, the opportunity to focus on these challenges in a confidential environment, away from work, in a purposeful manner, can yield significant results in a relatively short amount of time. More and more companies are seeking coaching for their valued executives to assess skills and provide a valuable resource during a period of transition to a new role. In some cases, coaching is done specifically to develop specialized skills needed in a particular role, team, or strategic objective. Certainly, human resource professionals provide many of these services within companies, but by their nature as employees of the same organization cannot engage in some of this work due to the ethical bind of dual relationship created by being both coach and colleague within the same organization and possibly members of the same management team. Some HR people are not well suited to coach by temperament or training. Most people recognize coaching as an activity associated with sports events. Uh, Executive coaching is another area where people are availing themselves of focused effort and awareness. Written research about coaching in business going back to the 1930s through the 1960s reveals that informal business coaching has been going on within companies for some time and has been studied for best practices along a number of lines. For example, during the 1930s, older employees received formal coaching on how to coach new employees around waste management. Since the 1970s, executive coaching has developed into a more widely sought service and is used by 59% of U.S. corporations. Coaching provides a focused, confidential, professional relationship where an employee or an employee sponsored by a company can sharpen insights and skills. Especially when there are sensitive concerns, coaching can be a more professional approach than involving subordinates or colleagues in addressing problematic team dynamics or behaviors, or proactively gaining insight into skills that can lead a team of individuals successfully. Coaching remains relatively new and self-regulating. Right now there are a number of organizations that provide training and ethical standards, but there is no one overseeing body that evaluates practice, credentialing standards, or enforces a code of ethics. As a general rule, most current coaching certification programs are postgraduate certificates earned following a master's degree and years of supervised work with individuals and systems of relationship. Coaches are drawn from business, behavioral science, organizational behavioral psychology, clinical psychology, and social work fields. Ideally, a coach will have had considerable supervised training in clinical relationship, where concerns about transference and countertransference have been identified. For those of you who aren't familiar with this term, these refer to seeing something that might be attributed to the client that really doesn't belong to the client. And sometimes people enact old relationships in new relationships with authority figures. These are somewhat technical terms, but they're not that mysterious. The coach should have long experience in relationships where behavioral change and insightful learning have been the focus of activity. This is because the pace of change has to be carefully assessed, and along the way you're looking at motivation, you're looking at stumbling blocks to maybe implementing changes. Training in conscious use of self is vital. People who are very aware of their role and the limitations and boundaries of that role. Awareness of projection is also highly useful. This can be where someone in a coaching situation is describing some feelings about perhaps a coworker or something, but they may be part of the problem, or they may be jumping the gun based on insubstantial evidence. So it's often very useful for the coach to be able to think systemically about relationships. While a coach is not always trained in diagnosing psychiatric disorders, knowledge of this may be vital in making appropriate referrals to those with more specialized training. In fact, knowing when a referral is required is quite important. Many professionals have experience in promoting behavioral change and are adept in assessing what will be most efficient in working with a particular client. One of the things we would look at would be what's the client's best learning style and what types of situations have allowed them to accelerate their learning in the past. Most persons with clinical training are well versed in working with individuals as part of larger systems and have demonstrated an ability to think systemically and objectively and are trained in group dynamics. Generally, a professionally credentialed person engaging in this work has been evaluated for skill in these areas for many years before their licensure, and the coaching certificate is often sought in order to use coaching skills that have been honed in domains over many years' time. There are management techniques and considerations learned in these settings that have broad application in nearly all human systems. A professional who is trained, experienced, and held accountable to enacting an established code of ethics is likely to have a more refined understanding of ethical concerns most especially related to confidentiality, but also roles and boundaries, and this is especially important when working with an individual as part of a relationship with a corporation. Confidentiality is a primary concern in coaching, and the coach has obligations in many areas to ensure appropriate boundaries around information that can affect both the company and an individual's employment. Executive coaching requires a nuanced awareness of the kinds of situations that can arise where ethical reasoning is vital, and should be able to provide examples of this from their prior experience. In a first meeting or in any initial undertaking with coaching, a coach should expound on that as part of their service to really detail and let people know what to expect. This is most important in the area of confidentiality, and the professional coach is going to enact a duty to inform. So they will spell out in advance, particularly in those situations where they're working with an employer and an employee, what areas are to be held confidential to the employee and what kind of information will be shared with the employer. Certainly, if you're contracting with an individual, all material is private to that individual, and they alone have control over information in the coaching session. How does coaching work? Some of the activities that occur in coaching sessions include assessment, formulation of a development plan, implementing a development plan, assessing progress and integration of new learning. And we really want to look at that, what's the observable action? How will we know how to quantify when we've achieved success, and what new behaviors or new ways of thinking could we observe and their effect on the business situation. Some meetings may include supervisors who are providing concrete feedback about on-site progress. Other specialized types of assessment can be undertaken. For example, a 360-degree assessment, which is often used at very high levels, where subordinates and colleagues are asked to provide feedback so that the executive can gain as complete a sense of direction as possible. Coaching invites self-reflection and provides direction, support, and resources for new learning. Coaching can be highly effective in identifying skills and working with an individual to integrate these in daily tasks and interactions. Part of the strength of this is that the coach develops a candid relationship with the individual, and together they work as a team to identify goals and to look at anything that's getting in the way of that, and to find sometimes new avenues to frame things so that someone's learning is enhanced. And there are a lot of techniques that we can generally offer, and skills building. There's high accountability in that the relationship develops and meetings are at regular intervals with clear to-dos and steps to be taken between meetings that a person is reporting on and expected to observe within themselves. The coach works to motivate and inspire the individual, and they're also monitoring effort and motivation and offering techniques for increasing efficacy. Coaches are also trained to work with resistance and to encourage self-assessment about motivation and to be thinking about ways of achieving a goal and in a timely manner. Coaching occurs in a couple of ways. Individuals can seek coaching directly and privately in order to enhance career performance and development. This is a proactive step and indicates a highly motivated individual. And this can be a very wise choice during periods of transition. Some examples would be someone who's resuming a career, maybe transitioning to a new field, or perhaps someone undertaking a promotion. And always a good thing because patterns get set down and these relationships are very significant. So sometimes getting some guidance in those early stages can really get someone off to a great start. Individual coaching can also be useful to executives when faced with a vital project or a change effort within a company. Further, executives often encounter sensitive situations where a confidential place to sort through challenges and develop new approaches can be most valuable. It can also be, during a period of anxiety around an employee situation. Sometimes a coach who has experience and may have encountered these situations before can really provide some additional feedback that can help someone to avoid the pitfalls of certain situations and provide a kind of holding environment for the stressors inherent in a particular situation. Increasingly, companies will seek coaching in order to develop an executive's capacities and refine skills that are vital to the success of the company, in which case the company is working, or the coach is working with the employee and the company to further the company's goals by ensuring that their valuable report has additional resources to do their job effectively. Lastly, human resource professionals have traditionally made coaching referrals in order to enact due diligence with problem executive behavior. This remains a fairly valuable use of coaching, where an otherwise perhaps capable manager is exhibiting some unwanted behaviors that could have negative consequences to the company's functioning, reputation, or even legal standing. And sometimes due diligence means that the person is coached about certain specific behavioral problems and given a new understanding and exercises and things that they do to make sure that they're following through with their employees. Some examples of managers who may have a poor ability to provide direction and timely feedback, may have a poor ability to provide direction and timely feedback to their reports. Still others exhibit poor skills with boundaries with subordinates, difficulties managing anger, or poor cultural competence. In these cases, coaching is sought to provide the opportunity for an executive to change behavior that could lead to termination if it continues. Coaching delivers insight into leadership behavior and style. It clarifies purpose. It improves communication and relationship and broadens perspective. Also helps develop new leadership skills and enhances the ability to overcome barriers to change. Coaching has been proven probably the most effective of all means of learning because it is a one-to-one situation and it's really tailored to the individual's need to gather new information and to implement behavioral change over time. Coaching identifies specific benchmarks for the accomplishment of specified goals that are observable and results-oriented. This is usually detailed in a development plan, which is done through interviewing the individual or the individual in conjunction with their supervisors or executives within the firm, where the goals of the work are spelled out and where there is some initial discussion of how success will be determined. This method of learning, again, has been demonstrated to provide the most sustained and lasting results over other methods of training. When a company contracts with a coach, some of the questions that are probably vital to establish in the first meeting would be who is paying, and if it's the individual who's paying, and many times an individual may choose to do this for themselves and may in fact invite their boss to have some say in it without the boss necessarily being engaged in the work, except by the individual's report. In other cases, the contracting agent is the company, in which case there will probably be a dialogue with the manager who's making a referral for a direct report who will be the coachee. So who will be paying, how long is the coaching engagement, and what are the goals of the coaching? Some of that gets established later as the relationship deepens. What information will be held in confidence? What types of information will not be held in confidence? And how will this information be protected? Other questions would be what information will be shared with employers if they're involved in this engagement, and what is their role? What type of deliverable does the coach provide to the employers in terms of reporting? This could be written reports. This could be periodic meetings to assess progress. There may be additional testing in terms of skill testing. Some examples would be MBTI or a Divine. In terms of assessing the employee's ability and skill, and looking for areas that may do with some development or areas of strength to be enhanced. Some further questions, when will additional meetings need to occur? And it's very important for companies to ensure that the coach is protecting both the individual's boundaries in work with their employer and the company's boundaries. And, you know, a good coach should be able to give some examples of, you know, situations where, you know, information or disclosure could lead to a conflict of interest or an ethical bind, and how that would be handled at the time. Coaching is contraindicated if there are concerns about an employee's behavior in terms of dishonesty, substance abuse, ongoing criminal investigation, or clear reasons for dismissal. Just, you know, occasionally there are some kind of vague symptoms that you may see that aren't quite acceptable, but they're not quite grounds for action, and sometimes coaching is a very proactive step with someone who's exhibiting some behaviors that are problematic. If the client is undergoing a severe life event and this is affecting their work adversely, or sometimes in an office, a lot of flooded disclosure of personal information to colleagues, or managing the employee becomes providing therapy, it may be an indication that the individual needs to seek some counseling from a mental health professional. And sometimes it's not clear. So a good coach is able to distinguish between mental health services and coaching behaviors, and may sometimes work with teams around making that distinction in some cases. Human resource professionals and corporate leaders can identify coaches of excellent reputation in their communities by networking and seeking referrals from colleagues or professional organizations in the community. Generally word of mouth and people affiliated with well-known businesses will often have used a coach or have access to literature about local folks who are working in this discipline. Some further resources would be the International Coaching Federation and the International Association of Coaching. I believe both of these organizations are for dues-paying members, but they also offer training and certification programs. In closing, coaching has become the preferred method of developing high-potential leaders within organizations. Coaching offers superior features over other training methods. Coaching can be tailored to the unique needs of an individual or the needs of a specific business enterprise. It provides intensive, time-limited training. It is goal-driven and identifies milestones that allow progress to be assessed. Coaching offers opportunities for ongoing performance assessment, increases self-observation, and conscious use of self as an instrument of effective business practice. Coaching offers systemic objectivity and broadening of perspective. Further, coaching is private and confidential. Coaching has consistently demonstrated a high return on investment. And now I'd be pleased to take questions.
Thank you so much, Jenny. And I do have a few questions for you.
Sure.
How do you protect your clients' confidentiality when you're working with their employer?
My own practice, which stems from years of working in clinical settings, is to be very specific with the employer about what the goals are, and to talk about the goals we've developed. These are usually behavioral, not a lot of personal disclosure, but more on concrete information related to business about how an individual is performing and what change would look like with them, and how to achieve that. In terms of working with the employee, sometimes having a person who's not in the company allows for a little bit more disclosure, maybe you know, about struggles they may be having or a challenge that they have. You know, generally if there's a lot of personal information, that kind of information really isn't relevant with an employer. Obviously, anything that an employer can't ask someone in an interview are not things I would necessarily be exploring in coaching anyway, or trying to elicit that information. But occasionally things come up that are personal around a particular learning style or something like that, in which case, if it's relevant to the firm, then I'm going to encourage the coachee to self-inform, or if it has bearing on their work, really holding people accountable for sharing information if it has bearing on their work. However, a lot of what happens in a coaching session is having someone self-reflect about events and how they're managing them. Obviously, all information about a company, its operations, anything that occurs in its business is completely confidential, and generally documents are reviewed with both parties. Usually anything that's going to the employer is reviewed with the individual who's being coached before the employer sees it, just to be very clear about what types of information are being shared.
And how long does a coaching session typically last? And how long would a whole coaching engagement be?
Well, coaching session, an initial session might be a little bit more lengthy, especially if there's a company involved or an individual, because many times there's a discussion both around the goals of the coaching, but then there's a pattern discussion that has to happen about orienting both parties to the coaching and determining what the responsibilities and the boundaries of the coaching will be. Typically, the most you would be investing in an initial session would be an hour to an hour and a half. Occasionally, if we're doing a 360 assessment, then it may be more lengthy because you're discussing a great deal of information about someone, and there's typically a pattern. There could also be times when the company has asked for additional testing or something that's being shared with someone. But in a routine kind of first coaching session, let's say you're contracting with a company working with an individual, you might broach the contract for maybe 5 sessions or a few sessions and then assess as you go along, because sometimes the problem hasn't been fully identified. In other cases, 5 sessions might completely address a concern or a needed skill, and the individual begins implementing this almost immediately and assessing their practice at it. So there can be wide variance. I often, when I work, offer some short-term engagements with lots, with a periodic check-in about the value proposition for the company and the client, so that it isn't overwhelming, and we certainly don't want to linger longer than we need to be there to assist the individual or the company. In other coaching sessions, when I work with individuals, usually it's something specific that can be worked on in a relatively short period of time. This is not all-encompassing. In other cases, it may be that the relationship is useful because they're very complex things, but sometimes in a relatively short space of time, there may be some new insight after thinking about something or discussing it in an objective way, and people are able to come to a new course of action pretty quickly, implement it, and assess how it's working. Often there's a relationship, so phone contacts can be intermittent, just to check in maybe a few weeks later, a few months later, and a lot of that occurs off the clock. But it can be a very effective way of identifying needed changes and helping someone to understand how they can influence a situation as just one person in often very complex teams.
Okay. And is it possible to try out coaching before committing to a potentially long or expensive course of coaching?
Absolutely. And you can go in and talk with the coach, and it's very important to develop a relationship with the coach. You should feel very comfortable. You should feel that, that there's someone that you can relax with, whose intelligence and professionalism you can respect. And you're going to gain a sense pretty quickly of whether there's a relationship there. Do you feel like this is someone you can connect with? And can you kind of think out loud with this individual? And people who are able to be self-reflective often use coaching very, very well, because it allows the coach to kind of think with you in something and then raise things in the moment that may not have occurred to someone, or may frame the problem or the concern or the situation in a different manner that allows new insights to occur. But it can happen very quickly, and generally within certainly 2 or 3 sessions, or even after the assessment or first meeting, you should have a good sense of what the coach is able to offer, how you felt in the meeting, or how your company felt in the meeting, and be able to assess it from there.
Okay, great.
So
Before we close, could you possibly offer us a couple takeaways?
absolutely. It's really a wonderful resource, and this has become so much more prevalent. There are usually coaches in nearly every community, and readily available through your colleagues or people in the community that you may already have relationships with, and you can really gain a sense of who is competent and who has done good work in the past. Another means, if your community proves to be somewhat limited, would be to contact the International Coach Federation or the International Association of Coaching. Some universities offer courses. There are also some training programs online, and you can certainly contact me if I can be of any assistance.
Okay, great. Thank you so much, Jenny. And for any questions from our audience, you should contact Jen at markins.com.
Thanks, Emily.
Thanks, Jenny.